Hey guys, welcome back to Tipping Scales. I'm John, and I don't have anybody with me today. Everybody just ate. I'm a little late in filming this video, so... Wait a minute. I do have someone with me! Teeny weeny tortellini, his best boy. But I really can't hold him like this for the whole video, so... I'm gonna put him back. Bye, bud. He's doing so well. Okay, so today we're going to talk about snakes and religion.
I also like to live dangerously.
I'm going to try to keep this very respectful of everybody's religions out there. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on particular religious beliefs and symbolism. If you want me to do a video like that, I can make it into a series and touch on each culture individually, but if I try to do that now, it's going to be an hour or more video, and nobody really wants to look at my face for that long. So I know this can be a spicy topic, so please keep it respectful in the comments. Don't be pooping on other people's religions. I'm not going to go into my own belief systems and things here. I know it's easy to want to do that. A lot of people have suffered from religious abuse and have spiritual trauma, and I understand you wanting to speak to that, and I understand people's opinions in this realm are going to be very strong. But please, please, please keep it respectful. I'll keep it respectful here. You keep it respectful in the comments. Let's get into this video. So what do snakes and fire have in common? Other than being wicked cool. It just sounded like a pyro. I'm not a pyro. Snakes and fire are both things that are numinous, meaning they're both intrinsically meaningful. The same can be said for wolves or anything else that we use to symbolize something else or help us better understand our world. There's something about staring into a fire. If you've ever been sitting around a campfire and you're just staring into it, contemplating life, something about that and watching a snake that makes it hard to look away. And that's something that's true even for people who don't like snakes. It's that sense of power, and it can include terror, but the main component in it is fascination. And we as a species have been fascinated by snakes since before the time of organized religion or written history. Before written history, we had oral tradition, and tradition is just passed down experiences. If we look back in time, no matter what faith or culture, we can all agree that we as a species originated from one place. Several, if not most, religions have a creationist belief, where we believe that there was a creator, a deity responsible for bringing us into existence. For the Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism, that's the first book of Genesis, where God creates the world, he creates man and woman in his likeness, that whole story. The Hindu belief is similar, where Brahma split himself in two to create the first man and woman. So in both the Eastern religions and the Western religions, there's a creation narrative with a God that creates two people, and from those two people, everybody else is created. Buddhism is kind of its own thing. It doesn't give a whole lot of thought to the beginning and end of the world, but there is at least one story of humanity being born, well, really reborn, because in Buddhism it's all cyclical. So there are basically three schools of thought for where we came from. Creationism, which basically the Abrahamic religions believe, Hinduism, the Zulu in Africa, each of the Native American tribes. Most religions have a creationist story. The second is Buddhism, which is kind of its own thing. They don't really contribute to the origin story. They think spending time thinking about it is very smooth brain. So that school of thought is just basically, it doesn't matter. We don't spend time thinking about it. And the third is the scientific approach, which has us evolving and coming out of Africa. So any way you slice it, from religion to science, we pretty much can all agree that we came from one place. How that came to be doesn't matter for today's video. So what does this have to do with snakes and why they show up in every religion around the world? Well, we needed to establish a few things that I think we can now all agree on. One, snakes are fascinating. They can be terrifying, but they are numinous. They are intrinsically meaningful, like fire. Two, tradition is based on passed down experience. And three, we all came from the same place. For the sake of argument, since most religions don't establish a where we were created outside of the Garden of Eden or wherever, let's take the scientific approach and say that we all came out of Africa. Even if you don't want to concede that it's Africa, at the very least we know it was our first time on the earth, and so there was no development. We hadn't started causing mass extinctions yet, so there was an abundance of animals, and as we would experience, an abundance of predators. Things like wolves and crocodiles are other animals, other predators that we found fear and fascination in, and also show up abundantly in religion as symbols of many different kinds of things. But that might be another video for another day. Right now we're talking about snakes. So it's logical to conclude that all early human beings had similar experiences with snakes. Back to the beginning of written history, even to cave drawings, there are examples of people being bitten and unalived by venomous snakes. So our early interactions with them formed our traditional views that came from those interactions that were then passed down first by oral tradition and then through written history and religion. So somewhere in there between the establishment of Eastern religions and Western religions, there was a split in the mentality of what snakes really symbolized to us. A lot of the understanding of the Eastern religions carried over to other continents even. You see a lot of similarities between Mesopotamian beliefs and Central American beliefs, for example, or beliefs in Africa. For the sake of keeping this from being a 12-hour long video, I'm just going to look at the Eastern religions and the Western religions. And I'm going to break that down even further by basically talking about Hinduism and Christianity. I'm using these examples because Christianity, Judaism, Islam all have their roots in the Hebrew Bible, and because, as I mentioned, there are a lot of parallels between Hinduism and a lot of the other cultures around the world when it comes to snakes. I know it's going to be a major oversimplification to do that, but for the sake of the length of this video, I have to do it that way. If you want me to turn this into a series and break this down by religion, I can do that. Comment down below and I will start compiling things on that because that is a big task, but I'll do it if you want me to. There's so much rich history and so many stories, even in these two examples we're about to talk about, that I could do a full video on each of these. So I'm gonna be leaving a lot of stuff out here. So for now, let's just start by looking at Hinduism and the Eastern view of snakes. So in Hinduism, along with Buddhism and many, many others, the symbolism of snakes is pretty complex and ambiguous. They're worshipped in temples as well as their natural habitats where people bring milk to them. They're not seen as evil, but as divinities representing both time and timelessness, both death and rebirth, both self-control and the poison of desire, both purity and bliss. It's incredibly dynamic. For each of these symbolic views, there are hundreds of stories centering around the Naga, or the divinities appearing as cobras. Sometimes they appear just as the snake, sometimes it's half snake, half person, sometimes it's a multi-headed snake. Each Naga does share some similar qualities. They get very upset by pollution, they're easily offended, but each one has its own personality, its own strengths and weaknesses. It's a very case-by-case representation. Sometimes a Naga is quick-tempered and destructive, and other times it's protective and provides blessings. There are hundreds of Naga and Nagini in Hinduism, and they all vary in status and roles of importance. Some of these Nagas show up in stories across religions. You might see one in Buddhism that you also see in Hinduism that you also see in Africa. There are a few very popular, very famous ones. Vasuki being the second king of the Nagas, loyal to Shiva in Hinduism. In Buddhism, you have most famously Mukalinda, who protected Gautama Buddha from the elements while he meditated. You've probably seen some of these pictures before. There's also the story of Shesha, the Nagaraja, the king of the Nagas, who holds the world and keeps it stable. And all of these stories vary by telling. Another super interesting thing is that these same views and these same stories are also part of the Abantu and Zulu people in Africa. The names may not be the same, but it's the overall same themes, or it was anyway. Now, I said those views were held past tense by the folks in Africa. Since then, there's been a lot of Christian evangelization of the Abantu, and it's kind of melded together in a different thing. There was one particularly traditional Abantu woman that I saw talking about the Naga and the influence that Christianity had on those traditions and beliefs. This is what she had to say about the snakes and the perception of the snakes in Africa after the introduction of Christianity. We are meant to worship them, but because of Western ideas like the Garden of Eden, most Abantu fear them. They literally hold all the knowledge to mental and physical healing. Hence the universal medical symbol. Quick side quest before we continue. That is the reason for the symbol, that there is a healing aspect associated with snakes. The origins of that are a little sketchy. It's thought to come from the Greeks, with the Greek god of healing Asclepius, who learned medicine from watching a snake bring some herbs to a dead snake, who was then revived, and then he got so good at mirroring this thing that he learned from the snakes that people weren't dying and going to the underworld, so Zeus got mad at him and hit him with a lightning bolt. And that's where the staff with the snakes, one of the places it's alleged to have come from. There's also a Roman story that's very similar, and then of course you have Moses, which we're going to get to that in a second. Where were we? Oh, right. The Garden of Eden and Western religious influence just got accused of sowing a fear of snakes. I know some of you feel that way too, and at face value, I can understand that. At a glance, it certainly makes sense. But let's dig into it briefly, just a little bit deeper. Most of us know the Genesis story of Adam and Eve in the garden. Satan speaks through a snake, convinces Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, and just causes the fall of man. And for that, God curses the snake to be legless, crawl on his belly, eat dirt, all those good things. So that's the first time we see the snake in the Bible, in the very first book of the Old Testament. There are many places throughout the Bible where this snake is described as having similar qualities as Satan, being rebellious and deceptive and things like that. But it's not actually until the very last book of the New Testament, very last book of the Bible, in Revelation, that we are told that this snake was no ordinary snake, and that this was Satan working through this particular animal. So, the majority of mentions of snakes in the Bible do point to them being dangerous, but there are a few places, with the exception of the Satan-possessed snake, where they are outrightly called evil, except when someone is calling somebody a viper or a cobra or a serpent as an insult. Outside of those reference points, which there are quite a few, there's not much that says that snakes as a species are evil. There's a whole lot that says they're dangerous, but evil is reserved for the possessed snake at the beginning of the Bible and the insults that are thrown at neighboring tribes and Pharisees and things like that. There's one story of Moses in the desert with the Israelites, and they were all being buttholes, so God sent a bunch of snakes to bite them, and then God told Moses to build a staff with a bronze serpent at the head of it, and that all who look upon that staff will be cured from their snake bite. There's a lot of significance to this. One is obviously the symbol of healing, like the Greek Asclepius story, but this also sets Jesus up to compare himself to a snake, this snake in particular. And that's quoted in one of the most well-known Bible verses in the book of John. Just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up. And that was a call for people to look to him as a symbol of healing and redemption and salvation, the same way that the Israelites in the desert had looked to the bronze serpent. Now that bronze serpent was later destroyed in the book of Kings because people were lighting incense to it. In another passage in Matthew, Jesus also praises the serpent. He says that we should be more like the serpent in our shrewdness. So while the majority of the Bible does reference venomous snakes as being dangerous quite often, and uses them as kind of an archetype for rebellion, using the first place that we see Satan manifest, we're also shown one not long after that that's an archetype of Christ. So what am I getting at here? I know this is kind of like a ramble, but we've got all these examples in all these different religions of snakes being used to represent and symbolize a great diversity of things. Christianity has obviously the most dualistic approach, representing Satan and then representing Jesus. Ultimate evil and ultimate good, with a few common sense things sprinkled in there, like don't get bit by a venomous snake, because that would suck. Eastern religions have snakes representing just about every big and important thing that I can think of. There is no one theme. No, this is just good and this is just bad. The prevailing theme in all of these religions is that snakes are a powerful animal that we like to ascribe very big roles to help us as a species navigate everything around us, from spirituality to morality, from good to evil, from creation to destruction, and even salvation. So is religion itself responsible for people's fear of snakes? It has definitely been ascribed to it, especially Christianity, but I don't think it's religions themselves that are lending to an unfair hatred of snakes. I think it's simply ignorance on a personalized level that then takes bits and pieces of whatever religion it is and kind of weaponizes it into a confirmation bias. Basically, the subconscious thought process would go something like this. I'm afraid of X, in this case snakes, because I don't understand them. So I'm going to point to this thing, Y, in this case religion, in order to rationalize and justify my feeling of fear. Religion as a whole has been notoriously used as this kind of scapegoat throughout history, and we still see it very much today. It's very in our face in how politics and religion are starting to blend together and become more intertwined. And that's a cycle we really got to break. That's something that's been handed down to us, you know. Think about how many wars were fought over religious reasons, in quotes, right? It's just a passing of the buck and just using religion as a scapegoat, really, at the end of the day. So when it comes to people's fear of snakes, I think it does come from an ancestral self-preservation kind of place. Our ancestors passed down their experiences and traditions at the same time they were building organized religion. But while they could have painted all snakes as evil, by and large, religion as a whole mostly just paints them as powerful, fascinating, and intrinsically meaningful. When you take that religion, whichever one it is, as a whole. You can't just go, like this, Satan, snakes, I'm gonna keep that one. You gotta take it as a whole and not cherry pick to validate your fear. I want to say again that none of this was meant to invalidate or mock anybody's religion or anybody's belief systems. I tried to look at this as like a complete outsider and try to come to a opinion that way on whether or not religion has played an important role or a big role in people being afraid of snakes or hating snakes. Again, I know religion can be a spicy topic, which is why I didn't include any of my own beliefs. I know I left out so much in this video that I wanted to talk about and that could have been covered, like snake handling churches, the annual snake miracle for the Catholics in Greece, the Midgard serpent in Norse mythology, all the stuff in Egypt, Central America, and everywhere else. But I figured I would keep it really simple this time. And if you guys do want me to do a series where I break it down for each one, I can absolutely do that. Just let me know. I'm gonna end this here. Please be respectful of people's religions in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like if you liked this video or you found it thought-provoking. Remember to be kind to yourselves and each other. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you on the next one. Bye. This is a snake video, and I don't even have a snake on me. This was poorly planned.